Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Bryn Austin, professor at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health and director of STRIPE, the Strategic Training Initiative for the Prevention of Eating Disorders. Our mission is to train the next generation to harness the power of public health to prevent eating disorders. With today's Facebook Live interview, we are thrilled to announce the launch of the STRIPE Advocacy Playbook. So what's the playbook? It's an online resource that uses tried and true strategies to make it easy for community champions to advocate for impactful policy changes that could help to prevent eating disorders and promote body confidence. And just to let you know in the audience, because this is a brief interview, we'll be wrapping up in just about 20 minutes. We won't have time for Q&A, but I encourage anyone in the audience with questions about the playbook or for our guest to submit those through our Facebook page. So now I am so grateful and honored to be joined today by national leaders and champions for equity and social justice, the incomparable Joanna Kandau and Skylar Baylor. Joanna Kandau is the founder and CEO of the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness and the author of Life Beyond Your Eating Disorder. She founded the Alliance after a long battle with eating disorders, and since then has become the nation's most influential advocate for better federal policy to address this public health crisis. Joanna serves as the community representative on the U.S. Health and Human Services Interdepartmental Serious Mental Illness Coordinating Committee, and she is past president of the Eating Disorders Coalition, the nation's preeminent eating disorders advocacy organization dedicated to U.S. federal policy. Skylar Baylor is the first transgender athlete to compete in any sport on an NCAA Division I men's team. By age 15, he was one of the nation's top 20 15-year-old breaststrokers. By age 17, he set a national age group record. In college, he swam for Harvard University on the winningest Harvard team in 50 years. Skylar's difficult choice to transition while potentially giving up the prospect of being an NCAA champion was historic and timely. His story has appeared everywhere, from 60 Minutes to The Ellen Show. Skylar is an award-winning advocate for LGBTQ rights and inclusion, for Asian American athletes, and for the eating disorders community. Like Joanna, he serves on the board of the Eating Disorders Coalition. So now I'll turn to Joanna and Skylar. You are both movers and shakers, and I bet you have a lot going on this week for Eating Disorders Awareness Week. Joanna, tell us what you're most excited about.
Absolutely, Bryn. And I really want to just take a moment and thank you and Striped and Skylar for being in this space with you today. So it is Eating Disorders Awareness Week. And, for us, honestly, at the Alliance, it's another day out of the 365 days a year that we do education, awareness, access to care, early intervention, and advocacy for all eating disorders. This week in particular, what we are most excited about is this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, is our Not One More weekend. It's our inaugural all virtual event that promotes the pillars of what the Alliance does: help, support, and recovery. So this Friday, we are going to urge individuals to smash the stigma and go through the shame that many of us that experience eating disorders have, and to pick up the phone and ask for help. Saturday is our National Day of Support, where we are doing something that's never been done before. We have a 16-hour support group marathon from 8 a.m. to midnight. Every hour on the hour, we're going to have different free therapist-led support groups for all folks experiencing eating disorders as well as their loved one. And last, finishing up on Sunday with our National Day of Recovery, we're really embracing life beyond eating disorders and asking folks to do something like download the playbook, like do phone to action with the Eating Disorders Coalition, and then wrapping up with our Rally for Recovery at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we come together as a community and say, not one more life lost, not one more stolen from this insidious disease.
Thank you, Joanna. The Alliance always has so much going on, and this week, everything you described just sounds terrific. Skylar, what do you have coming up this week?
Well, first, just like Joanne, I wanted to thank you for the space here. I'm really excited to be here to talk about this, and I just love the aspect of inclusion that always runs through both of your work, and also especially through the groups and stuff that I know, Joanna, that you're going to be doing with the Alliance. I have a talk coming out with Edgy on Friday. I have a couple of Instagram posts that I'm going to be putting out about this week and about what Eating Disorder Awareness Week means to me, especially as a transgender person who struggled with an eating disorder, and what inclusion looks like going forward. So not quite as much as the Alliance, but those are the things I hope to check out all the resources that you'll be putting out from the Alliance as well. So everybody should really be checking those things out. Yeah.
Thanks, Skylar. Thank you. That's excellent. You know what I'd really love to hear is the story of your decision to get involved in policy changes, advocacy with the government to see policy changes there. Joanna, did you have a key moment when you started to do that? When you just thought, I got to be doing this?
So I sort of fell into advocacy and policy work. In full disclosure, Bryn, I actually slept through American government in my undergrad because I hated all things politics. Didn't believe I ever had to connect with it. And I think a little over 18 years ago, actually, our dear friend and colleague on the Eating Disorders Coalition board, Millie Plotkin, did a candlelight vigil in Washington, D.C. And this was my first trip outside of Florida for the Alliance. And as I was getting ready to go, I had a family member who said to me, well, when you're in DC, you should meet with your member of Congress. And I had this moment of like, okay, well, what do I do? Because for me, governments felt so far reaching. It was something that we don't get involved. It's something that happens. So I went to Borders at the time and I bought one of those yellow for dummy books that, I think it was Politics or Government for Dummies. And I watched the Schoolhouse Rock, A Bill is a Bill. And I was like, okay, I think I understand what I'm doing. And so flew to DC and I was actually able to get a meeting with my member. And I remember going into his office and, sitting in this beautiful office with these like leather chairs. And he looked at me and he said, so why are you here today? And I was silent. I had nothing to say. And for those of you who know me know I'm never without words to say. And he looked at me, he said, is there anything you want to talk to me about? And I said, like, I almost froze. And then he looked at me and he said, what is your story? And I started sharing with him my experience with my eating disorder, how I did not have access to care, how there was no intervention, how I felt like this was my fault and I didn't even know where to turn. And it was in that moment, Bren, that I became an advocate because I saw something happen in his eyes by me sharing my story with him. And it was in that moment that I knew that my voice did matter. And even after years and years of having no voice, feeling like I didn't deserve to be seen or heard, I was validated. My voice was validated. And so I very quickly then started to look up whatever I could. And that's how I got connected with the Eating Disorders Coalition. And I haven't turned back. And I will tell you that at the base of who I am is an advocate and someone that will never stop using my voice as long as I have one.
Thank you, Joanna. It's so inspiring to hear your path and how you got there. And it wasn't like it was an obvious no-brainer you're going to do this, but that process and having an opportunity to share your story is transformative. Thank you. Skylar, what about you? Was there a moment when you decided I got to get involved in this kind of policy advocacy?
Yeah, I don't know if I could pinpoint a specific moment the way that Joanna can, and I love that story, and I totally know the shift that you're talking about when somebody gets it. As somebody who's advocated for transgender inclusion and transgender rights as a trans person, I think that the oppression and the discrimination that I've experienced, and I know my community experience, is so clear that sharing my story was imperative throughout my journey, if that makes sense. And so when I started shifting more into doing work about eating disorders, and I think it took me time because I was still recovering, I needed space before I was really ready to do advocacy work here. It seemed like a natural shift. And the way I see it is there's always changing the people, the masses, society, and that's really, really important, right? Getting people to shift in sort of a social sense is so important. But if there isn't top-down influence, right? If the laws aren't changing the policy legislation, then that bottom up influence doesn't really go anywhere. And so I realized that all this bottom up influence that I was doing on people was not getting supported from top down influence from the government. And that's kind of where that shift, I think, came in. And I think, like Joanna can really attest to the power of sharing my story as a person, especially as a transgender person, because people often box us in a sort of this box of other, right? Not understandable, incomprehensible, so far as to say abomination, whatever else, right? And the more I can stand up and stand in front of somebody and be like, I'm just a person, and you can't deny me that personhood when you stand in front of me, the more powerful that advocacy is.
Thank you. Thank you. This is phenomenal. And the power of stories. You know, we often say at Striped that data can inform policy, but it's stories that motivates the policy change. That's where you get action to happen, is stories like yours and so many others out there in the communities. So next, what I'd like to do is give our audience a brief video tour of what's inside the Striped Advocacy Playbook.
Welcome to the Striped Advocacy Playbook. In this video tour, you'll see how to navigate through the playbook to find the resources you need, from model policy and lawmaker meeting tips to step-by-step tools to help you plan your campaign for social change. We'll start by going to the Striped homepage at hsph.harvard.edu/striped. Here, you can find out about Striped, the strategic training initiative for the prevention of eating disorders, and lots of our other projects and resources. From here, we're going to click on Striped Advocacy Playbook on the left side navigation. Note that you can click on the arrow to expand or click the main link. I'll click the main link to take us to the Advocacy Playbook homepage. Here we are on the Striped Advocacy Playbook landing page. We've also made a shortcut for you to get here via tinyurl.com/stripedplaybook. From this page, you can also find links to learn more about our team, our funders, collaborating organizations, a welcome note from Stripe Director Dr. Bryn Austin, and a quick introductory overview of Playbook contents. The Striped Advocacy Playbook has something for everyone, whether you are a community advocate, public health professional, or policymaker. We've tailored a version of the playbook for what will be most useful for each of these audiences. If you're an advocate, for example, you'll click here. Here we are on the Advocates version of the playbook. While you're here, we'd love for you to complete this brief embedded survey to tell us more about you and to stay in the loop about future Striped projects. Once you're done, you can click on the playbook here. Now, we've arrived at the Advocates version of the Striped Advocacy Playbook. As you scroll down, you'll see links to resources, including our glossary of terms and our interactive map, where you can find data on the economic cost of eating disorders in your state. Very helpful information to have when you are meeting with your lawmakers. Back to the playbook, we'll continue to scroll down and take a look at the Power Prism. The Power Prism, a fantastic resource from My Power People, provides step-by-step tools to create a campaign for change. The Power Prism is built on 6 power tools of advocacy that help us reach our policy goals. These 6 tools are research and data collection, coalition building and maintenance, fundraising and development, grassroots and key contacts, media advocacy, and decision maker advocacy. You can learn more about these tools by clicking on the links within this page or in the left side navigation panel.
All right, great. So that was just a quick look inside the playbook, but there's lots more. It's designed for first-time change makers or veterans alike, from model policy to lawmaker meeting tips. We have resources in the playbook to help advocates, public health professionals, policymakers all across the country plan and manage their campaigns for change. So Joanna, you are the consummate veteran when it comes to policy advocacy. What's your first impression of the playbook?
I first want to just tell you congratulations, Bryn, to you and your amazing team at Striped for putting this together. This is nothing less of extraordinary. I think I shared prior to us going live that I couldn't get enough last night. I kept on going like deeper and deeper and was just very overwhelmed at just the usefulness of it. I think that, you know, when someone wants to make make a difference. Folks like Skylar and I that have been through something, and we're utilizing that experience to make a difference so that other folks don't have to go through the same things that we did. It's so oftentimes you don't know where to start. You don't know how to and I feel like this idea of advocacy and government change is so daunting, so far reaching. And I absolutely loved what Skylar talked about is, we could do as much grassroots as we can, but if we don't have that top down change, it's going to take us a very, very long time for things to actually change to where they need to, and where folks that are experiencing eating disorders deserve for them to change to. And so what I love about this playbook is that it's a step-by-step guide of here's possible legislation, here's how to start connecting with your members, this is how to get a coalition together. I mean, I for one, something that I fully connected to last night, it's something that's very important to me, is banning body size discrimination, for example. That is definitely something that the Alliance has very much been interested in here in Florida. And, I can't wait for advocates across the country to bring this. And there's so many different amazing opportunities. So, I very much encourage folks to look into it, read the different opportunities to get involved in. But more than anything, what this playbook does is that it doesn't make this process so daunting and unattainable, because I do want to just share this, is that our voices do matter. And for me, how this came full circle is I have a very fierce coalition of Florida advocates who show up time after time after time after time to the Hill. And in, I believe it was 2009, it was the first day of session, the phone rang, and on the caller ID, it said U.S. Capitol. And my colleague at the time was like, oh God, Joanna, what did you do now? And it was actually my member of Congress calling me to say that he had heard that our advocate in Congress had moved over to the Senate, and eating disorders didn't have a champion. And he asked me if he could be our champion. And that moment didn't happen because he had personally experienced eating disorders. It's because advocates continued to reach out. They continued to show up. They continued to say that we need change. And so I share this story because to remind everyone that your voice matters, and that change can happen if we come together and collectively move important and necessary legislation forward. So I can't wait for advocates to get a hold of this playbook and to start using it, because Bryn, change is going to happen because of this. So definitely check it out.
Thank you, Joanna. And a vote of confidence for you means a lot to us at Striped. And I just want to thank our team at Striped is phenomenal. Julia Vitaliano, Amanda Raful, so many other people, our partners and My Power people, and so much more did all the work to bring this together over a couple of years. And I really appreciate all that you're sharing. Now, Skylar, I know you've done a lot of advocacy around eating disorders, and you've also done just as much, maybe more probably, in other social justice issues, most especially LGBTQ rights, which is near and dear to my heart, having cut my teeth in policy advocacy as an LGBTQ activist myself. Do you think there's something in the playbook for others in other communities addressing other social justice issues, certainly eating disorders, but beyond eating disorders?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like Joanna, I have been overwhelmed in the best way possible going through the playbook and being able to just see all the resources. I know I even learned just doing that. So, one of the things we hear a lot, especially right now, and especially over the past year of massive social upheaval in a really good way as well. I think that we hear often, like, just use your voice, say something, do something, right? And how, right? So yes, we all know we need to do something, but how? And I think that this is the most important part of the playbook. It's giving you that how, those sort of like lamp posts to light your way, and we get to figure out the in-betweens. And that's our creativity as advocates and our own stories. But having the sort of guidance, I think, is so important. And especially for marginalized folks whose voices are often pushed to the bottom for lots of reasons, but access to resources is one of those huge barriers, right? When we can't even have our voices heard, or we don't have the educational resources to be able to speak about it. We don't have the platforms. When social media algorithms prioritize white cishet men or white cishet women, right? We just don't even have the ability, even if we do speak, if we have all the right materials, they just don't get online the right way, right? So I think the playbook is an excellent way to provide that framework for voice that that can kind of circumvent some of those issues, especially for barriers for folks who are marginalized.
Thank you, Skylar, and thank you for those examples of ways it can be used to push forward on our social justice, on equity, our anti-racist mission, all of that. There's tools here that can work for everyone. Thank you. Thank you. So Skylar and Joanna, I'm so grateful for your sharing your insights today and joining us for the launch of the Striped Advocacy Playbook. Before we sign off, I'd like to share a few wise words from U.S. labor leader and civil rights activist Dolores Huerta. She says, every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person is a potential activist. Every minute is a chance to change the world. Let's change this world. Bye for now, folks.